right, welcome back. This is Red Hat Dan on Tech. Today we're going to be joined by my partner in crime in the Ramalama project, Eric Curtin. We're going to be talking more about using AI in a GitHub workflow. So Eric, you found this project called Sorcery AI and added it to Ramalama, and I want you to give us a little history. How'd you find it, and give me a little information about it.
How did I find it? Yeah, that's a good question. Like a lot of us at Red Hat, I maintain multiple open source projects upstream. Code review is a very tedious process, and especially because open source, we tend to work in globally distributed teams. Sometimes the maintainers of our project aren't available 24 hours a day because we have to sleep, etc. But with the advent of AI and there was ChatGPT and Copilot and all of these things, the reason I found Sorcery AI is I said there must be a half decent code review bot around. So basically, I did a Google and I tried a couple of solutions, and this one I thought was pretty cool. It kind of feels like continuous integration 2.0. Because it's like another form of CI on your project. But some of the things I really like about it is there was basically no configuration. It was just kind of like 2 or 3 clicks and it's running. And it's also low maintenance. It's kind of not like the type of CI, I must fix the test, so I must fix that, the YAML is broken. There's basically no code or configuration really.
Yeah, I think one of the things you talked about is getting people to actually review the code, and several of the projects I have, I'm the only upstream, right? There's no one to review it. So getting to the point that you have an AI to review it, at least gives you that warm and fuzzy. So anyways, how did you configure Sorcery AI? How did you add it to the Ramalama project?
It's very straightforward. You basically, I think I went directly to the Sorcery.ai website, but it must be less than 5 clicks. Like you go to the screen to turn it on, then you just set up the permissions. So like Sorcery AI plugin can touch your GitHub organization or repo. And then it gives you a configuration kind of UI. You can accept all the defaults, but that kind of the things in that configuration UI will kind of be like, will I draw diagrams for each pull request? Will I summarize each pull request? Should I leave comments? All kind of configurable options of what you want it to do and you don't want it to do. To be honest, generally, I just accept all the defaults and deal with it. I haven't looked into that level of detail, but it's as simple as that, really.
Now, Sorcery AI, I think it's a startup company, right? And we don't know that much about who's behind it and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, that's true. I haven't looked into the detail who owned it. I suppose my fears are a bit relaxed because any of the projects I enabled it on were fully open source, so everything's in the public domain anyway. So it kind of relaxed my fears quite a bit.
Yeah, we also don't know which, is it using OpenAI in the back end, or is it using a private model for its AI and things like that. But as you say, our GitHubs are fully public, and we know that Microsoft is going through ours and watching everything going on anyway. So if another third party vendor comes in and starts watching it, but brings us benefit, and I think the other cool thing about Sorcery AI is that it's free, or at least free for open source projects, so fully open source projects. I don't believe that, obviously bringing it into your private Git and GitLab repositories might be a little more questionable, but if you're a fully open source project, then be able to take advantage of it and be able to try it out for free is great. Why don't we, you want to share some examples of stuff we've seen with them? We can continue the conversation. I think people would want to see how Sorcery AI actually interacts with humans.
This is a project I started for Lava CPP upstream to do command prompts basically, which isn't that simple in C++, but it's a project called line noise at CPP. And the thing about C or C++ code in comparison to, say, other higher level programming languages is code reviews can be quite tedious because you're thinking of memory. I'm not writing over memory. I shouldn't be in free memory at the right time. But I thought this was an interesting example. So this is an engineer. I know he opened the PR. He's an amazing engineer. But one thing I noticed was he called these two mem copies, and they were copying. One of the mem copies was copying within the same buffer, so the memory could actually overlap. So when you're doing that, essentially in C, you should use a memloop instead of a mem copy. There was a second line of code it called this out on, where it was two completely different pieces of memory, actually. So it gave this feedback for both the lines. And it was actually correct in one case and incorrect in the other. But the point is, it pointed out an area of code that we should take a closer look at. The code submitter and me as the code reviewer. So I thought that was quite useful. I responded to the code submitter, what do you think of this feedback? And the submitter said, yeah, that's correct. I'll fix it up. And yeah, that's just one example.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So, I think probably it's Sorcery AI's strength, to me, one of its strongest things is to lint code, or, it's basically a super powerful linter. And it looks, when it's able to find things like this, it's obviously awesome because, you might not find that issue. A human looking at it, might not notice it and get in the code, and then suddenly you have unstable code because you're overwriting memory in certain places. So that's a great example of the power of it. Another example I really like is that I, as a lazy human, when I open up a pull request, I might, make fairly decent changes, and then I write a synopsis to the top that's very short. So if you get another example, just show the types of comments that it will make on, basically it summarizes what you're changing in your code very well. So so you have an example of that? If you just go to the top of the GitHub, just to show the type of feedback that you get from it. So here I put in just a little line that I'm watching for no containers, which I'm showing my own bad coding, but then you'll see the summary from Sorcery, and they basically list out changes, enhancements, different things that really what this PR actually changed. So it really looks at it and is relentless. Now I scroll down a little bit more, and it actually starts to show you charts and things like that. So it really will go in, and you can, as someone that doesn't really understand the code, perhaps, you can start to get actually lots and lots more information about, what's going on in the code. And then often under tips and commands, it's going to give you things that, you're surviving. Maybe you want to change this or change this piece of code. So just, its ability to understand the code and review it and really explain what your changes were going into it. So this is an interesting case, right? You and I were, I opened up this to basically do better UI for the human, to tell it that, this feature is not supported with no container. But you and I had a conversation during this pull request. So I want to scroll down there. So in this part of the PI, you started suggesting, a different way of, we might want to design Ramalama, and then I responded with my ideas around Ramalama and, potentially the way we want to do something in here. And the interesting thing here is Sorcery was watching our conversation, And then it comes in and basically gives us additional pointers. So one of the things, it's not only just reviewing the code, but it's actually watching the, human interaction. So anything we're putting into the Git transition, it acts like another human making comments on it. This is both goodness and badness. I think sometimes it gives you good points and gives you ideas and other things to think about. But we also have to understand when we're using Sorcery AI that it's watching everything. And as I often like to say, when you're not paying for something, that means you're not the customer of the product, you are the product. And in this case, Sorcery is learning from us. So as we go through and do this, Sorcery is getting better. And what I find is Sorcery over time is actually getting better at understanding Ramalama. It's increasing its knowledge of our interactions and things like that. So, kind of creepy and kind of cool at the same time. But overall, I think it's beneficial.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And there are some pull requests where we take almost all feedback from Sorcery AI and take action to improve the PR. And there's also some PRs where like it's basically wrong or low quality feedback and we ignore it. But like we as humans, we have, the choice to set it.
Yeah, we can make the decision. I mean, you don't have to take, it doesn't have, it's not like we have to pass a, we have the choice of whether we want to ignore it or read it. I just would advise people to read through and understand what it's saying. And often it's going to prompt you to have better ideas and things. So I think, we talked before we started recording about another example where someone opened up a pull request and added a whole bunch of features. And want to talk about that? I don't know if you have that example, but
yeah. So this was the pull request I reviewed, and the pull request is great, and it was but it was great. But the Sorcery AI review bot basically it identified an unused variable that we didn't need this enumerate thing, etc. And there's no way I'm going to block a merge of a pull request on something like one unused variable because you have to go through new builds. Someone has to re-push their code. There's a cost, right? So I wrote a comment under the Sorcery review comment saying, yeah, maybe we should catch this in a follow-on PR. And Sorcery AI came back and it automatically filed this issue in our project. So one of us could get to it later, and we basically didn't block the progress in the PR. We could merge it and kind of bike shed this kind of minor nit, if you want.
Yeah, so that's cool. But I like to point out to people that AI is supposed to make us more efficient, and but it's supposed to be helping us. In this case, it's asking us to do more work. And so that's kind of interesting. But I was going to talk about the other case where it basically told an engineer that, he had his pull request generated too much complexity. And, that
was a very interesting example. So a popular term that's going around now is this vibe coding term, and people kind of scoff at it and say, codery bots, they're not intelligent. They can't write complex code. And in my opinion, they're right. I'd like maybe a bot, an opinionated topic, but maybe a bot can write 100 lines of half decent code. And after that, it doesn't really understand the greater context of this at times. But this was an example where Sorcery AI basically pointed out I don't have the pull request here now, but basically pointed out that the function was starting to get complex, kind of like a static analysis tool within. And it suggested to the submitter, maybe you should refactor. And what the submitter say, because refactoring is, it's not rock star work, right? You're just reordering and restructuring code. Some people will call it janitorial work. I think they call it that in the kernel community. So the submitter responded, "Sure, could you write the refactoring for me?" And Sorcery AI actually responded with a way they could refactor the code to reduce its complexity and split it into maybe 2 functions or so. And the submitter took that example and then rewrote it again because, obviously when a coding bot gives you code, it's often imperfect. So it's important to take that and review it and make sure you understand it and put it, human touch on it. Excellent.
But it gave me basically, took away a lot of the grunt work, and then he just had to clean it up.
Yeah.
And I've also seen some pull requests that I put in a piece of code, and right in place, Sorcery will come up and say, "Well, wouldn't it be better to write this function this way?" And a few times I've looked at that and said, Sorcery, you're right. And then I'll cut and paste what they changed and put it back into my code and repush the change. And, because they've simplified the code or that type of thing. So, so anyways, overall, I think it is, but that, in other conversations I've had with people, they brought up the problem of, aren't you worried about, using AI to write code? Is there potential for it to take some code from the internet and give it to me, then I don't have a copy written properly, or but I haven't seen it do that type of thing, and we're not really telling Sorcery to go write code for us.
Right.
What I usually see it doing is rewriting our code. Basically, it's just taking our code and shifting it around a little bit, attempting to make it, better for us, or giving us a different idea of how we might want to write the code. So that allays my fears that potentially I'm pulling in copyright code into some code that I shouldn't be using inside of the Ramalama project. So overall, I mean, are you planning on using this in other projects? Besides Ramalama?
Yeah, so for the past few months, I've enabled this on basically any open source project I've created or started on my personal GitHub. Because the way I see it, it's kind of like, if I like to have that feedback, because it's so easy to set up and the builds basically have no maintenance. There's no config files to worry about or no tests to rewrite. I always enable it because worst case scenario, if the feedback is low quality on a certain pull request, I can choose to ignore it, right?
Yeah. All right. So I agree. I think I plan on trying to get on in all of my different outsourced projects. I think, again, going back to, if you have a project that has very little other maintainers, then it's critical. It gives you at least another set of eyes to go through your code. But even on larger projects, I think it's helpful. And I also think it's going to help teach programmers how to do better jobs. So, for a junior level programmer, it's worth them going through and reading what it's suggesting. And I think it helps them learning. It helps, I think, people coming back later looking at the pull requests, its synopsis is far better than, at least I tend to write. And probably that a lot of engineers write of what they're actually changing. So overall, I think it's great. So I would advise everybody to try it out. But thanks for joining me, Eric. And we'd love to hear your feedback on if you try out Sorcery AI based on this. Bye.
Cool. Thanks, Dan.